Good evening and welcome. You're watching India Now and I'm Ruchi Bhatia. Straight up then, all the action was happening at ICICI Bank. Remember, the board today met for the second straight day, and despite the poor performance in Q4, ICICI Bank's investors, on the other hand, were preferring the stocks. It led to gains on the Nifty. The stock was at a 2-month high. But as we are telling you, all eyes were on that board meeting. And while we are still waiting and watching for all the developments that may come out of that, it needs to be seen that the board is absolutely quiet on the alleged conflict of interest allegations that have been made against Chanda Kochhar. In fact, calling it a usual board meeting, Chanda Kochhar yesterday, the chief said that they will be discussing strategy for FY19 in this year. On the other hand, we're also picking up the government nominee, Lok Ranjan, has decided to maintain his distance from that meeting for the second straight day. But before we take that story any forward and get our guests, let me take it across to my colleague Neha Bothra. Neha, you've been tracking that story since yesterday. In fact, even today, you've been present at the ICICI headquarters since morning. What are you picking up? Did the board take up the issue with respect to the Videocon loan case at all?
We are given to understand the board meeting has concluded, and we are given to understand it was business as usual, wherein the board discussed matters relating to planning, strategy and budgeting for the coming new fiscal year 2019. However, do remember that as far as strategy is concerned, restoring the faith of investors is a topmost priority for ICICI Bank at this point, and the management did realize that when communicating with the media yesterday, helped them earn interest in terms of the confidence of investors. Do remember that brokerages have been bullish in ICICI Bank, not to mention the upbeat street reaction as far as ICICI Bank is concerned. Not to say that the management was forthcoming in their responses to queries, but the very fact that the management wanted to answer these questions reassured investors that the management wanted to be transparent in the matter, and the fact that they today clearly indicated that there would be some deliberation in the matter, giving confidence to investors that there would be some sort of supervision that would ensure that the perception of loopholes in corporate governance would be fixed. And this itself has been a bonanza for investors, as was clearly visible during market hours today. The trading action clearly reflected that. So did the brokerage commentary coming in today. Apart from that, also remember that ICICI Bank, even though profits have been under pressure this quarter, in fact, they dropped 50%, largely on account of high provisions. But the management adequately made clear and sounded very confident about the coming 2 years when they put out a strategy for 2020, indicating that net NIMs would be about 1.5% and overall provision coverage ratio would increase to 70%. All these factors allowed investors to believe that the management was sincere in tackling many of the issues that ICICI Bank is grappling right now. And of course, it went a long way as far as restoring the confidence of investors is concerned. And this really was the main agenda as far as the board meeting today is concerned, we are given to understand.
Absolutely, but it is also important to respond to all those corporate governance charges as well that the bank is seen to be lacking. In fact, that's what a lot of people are saying. Neha, many thanks for getting in all those details. And as at ET Now, we've been telling you the government from day one had been saying that they will be maintaining an arm's length distance from any of the board proceedings at ICICI Bank. And we are given to understand that for the second straight day, the government nominee director on the board of ICICI Bank, Lok Ranjan, has decided to skip the meeting. In fact, the government is going to wait for the investigative agency's reports on ICICI Bank. They believe they will act promptly if the investigative agencies indict the bank management. But so far, till the time they do not have anything in black and white in their hand, they will not go ahead with it. In fact, we are also given to understand that the government's second rationale is the fact that they believe that they are a minority shareholder. Now, remember, the government holds only about 0.22% in ICICI Bank, and they believe that the ICICI Bank board can completely overrule a minority shareholder's view. Thirdly, they believe that the RBI is a regulator. They have more power to inspect ICICI Bank's book. And just the way the RBI, in case of Axis Bank, had looked into what was happening at the bank, if they find any impropriety charges here, then the RBI should take the view and should ask the board to respond accordingly. But so far, we are given to understand the board, the government nominee director on the board of the ICICI Bank, has not submitted any of these queries in a written manner for ICICI Bank. In fact, to discuss that story in detail, we're joined by D.K. Mittal, former banking secretary from Delhi, Sailesh Haribhakti, the chairman of Sailesh Haribhakti Company from Mumbai on the phone line, and also the corporate advisor Prabal Basu Roy from Bengaluru. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining in and speaking to us. Mr. Mittal, let me first ask you a very important question. The fact is that the government has decided to steer clear of any controversy with respect to ICICI Bank, while we're yet to hear from the bank as to what really happened in today's meeting. What we are given to understand that they did discuss the FY19 strategy. But why has the government at all, not participated?
Well, that's very difficult to say as far as I'm concerned, but we can only mention that what should have been done by the board. I believe directly government should not interfere in that, because there is a regulator sitting, which is called the RBI, and it is they who have to supervise all these issues. So ideally, board should have debated these questions, should set up some independent directors committee. They take some assistance, come back, and they should either exonerate the CEO or they should say that they are a prima facie case. So either way, it is harming the interests of the institution, the CEO in person, as well as of the country. They are one of the largest banks. The charges are being levied left, right, and center, and there is nothing coming out in terms of knowing whether these charges are correct or not correct. So that is what the role of the board should have been. They should have been proactive in doing that, and in fact, that is their responsibility. They are supposed to be doing that. They are responsible for that as per the Companies Act.
Absolutely. The board should have been proactive into looking into all these charges. Mr. Haribhakti, what is your view on this matter? The fact is that the government has decided to steer clear. They are citing a lot of reasons, especially saying that they are a minority shareholder. Their view can be overruled, and only when they have something in black and white will they go ahead and seek, or put their view ahead in the ICICI Bank board meeting. But how important really is to look into those charges of corporate governance lapses, because this has been, while on one hand, a lot of brokerages have given a thumbs up, the stock was even, up in trade today, the investors were cheering, but the fact is that it is the second largest bank, so to say. It is a systematically important bank. How important is it to look into the charges of corporate governance lapses as well?
Well, I think the government has taken a principled stand in this matter. They have recognized that the onus to actually act in the matter is on the regulator, which in this case is the Reserve Bank of India. And as Mr. Mittal pointed out, the Reserve Bank will take action once they are in clear sight of the findings of the investigating agencies. We must recognize that this matter is pertaining to a whistleblower complaint which happened perhaps 2 years ago. And at that time, when the complaint first happened, some processes were actually performed, and we don't know exactly what all went into those processes, but it looked like those processes resulted in the stand that the board has taken. It is only when more facts have come to light and the investigating agencies are looking into those facts that the question as to what ought to be done to preserve the highest standards of governance comes into question. And my own belief is that it is important to wait for the findings to emerge to make sure that there is substance in what is being alleged, and then the action should follow.
All right, let me also take that point across with Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, you heard Mr. Haribhakti say that the government in this case has taken a very principled view, but the fact is that they are saying that they have only 0.2% minority, and they're a minority stake, they're a minority shareholder. do you, does this argument cut ice with you, or do you believe that the government is just shrugging off its responsibilities? If they had any problems, so to say, with the fact that the board should have been more proactive, that they should have, ensured that their member, the nominee director of the board of ICICI Bank, he should have been present in today's meeting and expressed those concerns.
This is, after all, a bit of a tricky matter. As far as the government is concerned, I think the place where they probably went wrong was 2 years ago, when the whistleblower's complaint was given to each agency of the government, including the Prime Minister's office, ED, CBI, etc. At that time, not to take action against it in terms of investigation, I think was perhaps in hindsight an error. However, having said that, as of today, the situation is in the public domain. It's the principal responsibility of the board, as I've maintained consistently, to take action either way, and of Chanda Kochar in person, because this is a very personal matter which has happened regarding her husband. So these are the two players in this. As far as the government is concerned, I think as far as today's decision is concerned of its nominee staying away with just a 0.2% holding, etc., is actually fair. I mean, they have used this as a signaling mechanism to say that, we are out of this till we have some report in our hand, which is happening through the normal channels. So I think from that perspective, it is fine. But after all, you see, the main issue here is what, and I don't want to sound prescriptive about it, because these are very personal matters. Everybody decides based on what they think is right or wrong. But this is a matter of not legality. This is a matter of accountability. And this is a matter of propriety in governance, especially when you're in public life. I think that is the distinction which needs to be made.
In fact, the point is, in fact, let me take that across to Mr. Mittal. Mr. Mittal, the fact is that, you heard Mr. Roy say how 2 years ago, the problem is that, from DFS, they did not take any view on this matter. The government, in fact, even the Prime Minister's office failed to take a view on this. Do you believe part of the problem comes from the fact that there seems to be a turf war between the RBI as well as the government on private sector banks?
I do not believe so. No, it is not possible for us to comment. If there was a complaint received by the government and the PMO, I am confident this must have been sent to RBI for taking appropriate action. That is the right structure, that is the right format, that is the intention of the regulatory framework. And just to update, to my best of my knowledge, RBI did ask a report from the ICICI, which was submitted to them, and let us believe that RBI had a look at it and they ultimately agreed with it. That is, they agreed with it, or they are still having discussions, so we are not aware of that. But the fact is that RBI did take an action on that, and DFS never interfered directly with any bank. When you get a report or a complaint against a public sector bank, that's a different issue, because you have a CVO appointed by the government, and then normally the CVO office reports directly to CVC. So they route those complaints to CVO, and CVO sends a report which ultimately is acted upon by the channel, which is supposed to be looking at complaints of integrity and non-performance. So I think there is a structure laid down very clearly, and I don't think there is any issue on this aspect because of the differences between RBI and the government. But let me say that these differences have always been there, and they should always remain there, because that is the plurality of thinking should always arise. Nothing should be made personal, and that I don't think so. At this stage, there is nothing personal between RBI and the government, whether DFS or DE or anybody else.
While we're yet to hear from the board of ICICI Bank, Mr. Roy, let me put that question across to you. Where do you think did the board go wrong? The fact is that, even yesterday, when a lot of reporters out there at the press conference asked Chanda Kochar as to what was the way forward from here, what is it that the board will discuss, she said this is going to be a usual board meeting. She said, they will be discussing the FY19 strategy. The fact is, that there are slippages have in fact even risen fourfolds this time around. We have seen a massive downfall with respect to profits, and that has mainly happened on account of these loan disbursals that were given without really putting much thought to it. Apart from that, we are seeing the massive surge in NPAs, and despite that, when such a case of impropriety comes in, then as the head of the bank, you should take a step back and, let the board decide where things should go from here. Where do you think the board really went wrong in this case?
Yeah, of course. I mean, on this view, my view has been very, very consistent, really. Like I mentioned, these are very subtle issues of governance. And it's nothing to do with the legality. On a legal matter, I think they'll still say, I think people are fine. Chanda Kochhar may not resign, the board may not take the decisions they are supposed to take on this particular issue. Legality is fine. But I'll give you an example of an issue which hit the global scene and created quite a global turmoil just around the same time that this controversy was doing in early April. This was to do with Sir Martin Sorrell, the chairman of WPP. Purely on a whistleblower's complaint in which financial propriety was alleged, without giving any details. Within a week, Martin Sorrell met the board, and a person like him, who was the face of the institution of WPP for the last 33 years, and a big global icon, he just quietly stepped down. And that is the point here. The real point is that, banking is an institute, as a business and as an institution, is based primarily on trust. Trust of customers, trust of the depositors. That's basically what it is. And in such a situation, the person who is the face of the institution, Chanda Kochhar in this case, could have decided to step aside, which is all that I've always asked for maybe a few months till a proper investigation is done by the board itself. If that could be done and the reports shared in the public domain, there was nothing else to talk about. But that is what is not being done, and the board in this case seems to be favoring the individual rather than the institution. That is where I think the board frankly goes wrong. And if it has something very substantive, why not share it in the public domain? That is the least which can be done in these situations. So that is the subtle issue which I would like to bring across. It is nothing to do with legality, but it is to do with propriety in public life.
Absolutely. In fact, that's a very valid point, and we're yet to hear from the board as to the outcome of today's meeting as well. But on that note, let me thank my guests, Mr. D.K. Mittal, Shailesh Haribhakti, as well as Mr. Roy. Many thanks for taking your time out and speaking with us on this matter.